With Curse of Osiris officially released, and being able to get my fair share of hands-on time with the content, I decided that after seeing all the negative feedback and toxic comments all over the place, I thought I would weigh in on my thoughts on the expansion and what was done right, also some things that could have been improved on. There will be some story talk throughout this video, as well as some video content from the campaign playing in the background, so be wary if you don't want anything spoiled. Now that that's out of the way, let's get right down to it. After downloading the update and waiting for the servers to come back online, we were greeted to a pretty great little cinematic intro into the new expansion titled Curse of Osiris. I'm not going to go through a lot of the story, detail for detail or anything like that, but the story to me felt really good, and I thought it was done very well. Granted, I wish there was a little more with Osiris himself. Maybe fight beside him for the final battle or something like that instead of just chasing him through time and space. And you only really get to see him in person in the closing cutscene where he decides that he's better off going back to the portal. I would have liked it if they would have done something similar to the intro mission of Destiny 2, where you actually got to see the other characters and have them actually do a little more with you side by side. But it still overall was not a bad story. I did feel that there was a lot of disconnect here from the base game, which seems to be a pretty common problem with a lot of the Destiny DLC packs. Looking back at House of Wolves and Dark Below, you played through the content, it was great, but it kind of seemed in its own little vacuum as opposed to really changing a lot from the world itself. So there wasn't a lot to connect them to the base game, as you kind of see with this DLC as well. But moving forward, after you get done with the story, which gave me a couple hours of content, I didn't really rush through it. I kind of took my time, enjoyed a lot of the skyboxes, a lot of the new visuals that you have from Mercury, which, by the way, is absolutely gorgeous, especially when they went to the future and past versions of it. It gave very different feels, so it was a pretty neat little take on everything like that. Bungie even said, though, that the end game is really where it's going to continue to bring people back, and you're going to kind of have that grind. And anybody who's played Destiny before, it definitely is true, and it seems to be somewhat still true here. Once you hit the level cap, which bumps you up to 25, which took, actually, by the time I completed the story, I was around 25, but that's where a lot of the big time sink ends up being. The expansion really doesn't feel any different from that. You do unlock normal heroic adventures that take you into the Infinite Forest. You also do get the Heroic Strike playlist, as well as the ability to do the prophecy tablets that actually get you some pretty sweet looking loot. The adventures into the Infinite Forest, great concept, but it definitely could have been fleshed out a little more. The variety of each adventure is absolutely fantastic. You're actually able to get different set pieces and everything. I think it's a great concept, but unfortunately it does come back to playing the same 3 adventures over and over again, just slightly different routes, different enemies perhaps. I'd love to see this expanded on, more adventures, a little more variety, because I think the concept is definitely well done, and all 3 adventures that they do give you, though, do feel different from each other as far as how the final bosses, how the final fights tend to go. Ranging from having to chase one of the enemies down through different checkpoints, just having to go through and kill the final boss, or even the one where it's basically gives a little bit of a sort of a tower defense feel to it, involving the Hive. I think they're all pretty good to play with, but as with everything, the 3 adventures only gets you so far, and I could see it losing its luster after a couple weeks or so. The heroic versions, the modifiers do change every day from what I've seen, and they do make each adventure a little bit more unique, but again, 3 missions, so you're really not getting a whole lot of variety aside from what modifiers you get, and that can ramp up the difficulty a little bit. But speaking of heroic activities, the Heroic Strike playlist is back. Well, sort of. There are no modifiers, which is, to me, is a little bit of a letdown. Having harder enemies is definitely a great way to challenge players, but it ultimately was the modifiers that they had at their disposal that can really take a normal, pretty basic strike, go through, shoot the mans, and turn up the difficulty to make it an even better experience for you and your fire team. And they've got a ton of modifiers at their disposal, and they added them to the heroic adventure, so why not put them back to the strike list playlist as well? The amount of rewards that you do get from doing the heroic strike definitely makes it a little bit better of an option to choose to do that versus the normal strike list. But is that really enough to keep people coming back for more than a month or two? We'll see. What I'd like to see them do, like they did in Destiny 1 especially, is add the strike-specific loot back into the game, or some form of system, some type of loot system that's pertaining to the strikes and heroic strikes to actually give people reason to go back and play all your strikes. You know, bring the end game back to where it was instead of feeling like we kind of took a little step back. Not much, but just tiny hop. But one thing that they did add that is new for this expansion are the prophecy tablets that are related to the Forge. Another thing implemented when it is implemented in theory, it's great, and it still could be good down the line, but currently it leaves a little bit to desire. It does bring back a little bit of the grind, which I kind of long for with Destiny 2, but the end result could have been a bit more expanded on, as with most things kind of with this game so far. What they do have to offer, though, is you get a prophecy verse, and it's essentially go find, collect, bring back, and you get rewarded. A lot of the times it has you to get a bunch of small regular grade materials. You bring them back to Brother Vance and he gives you a rare version of said material. It ends up taking 10 regular ones to make a rare one. Sometimes you get lucky and you get a rare one to drop out in the wild. Not very often. And depending on what kind of verse you pick, it makes a difference on what materials you need to collect and what activities you actually ultimately have to do to obtain them. Certain materials require you to run public events and open up chests out in the world to get the components. The other ones I ran into, the components came from running strikes, crucible, or heroic adventures. They also have ones I believe that are related to the raid and trials as well. So it's a way to get people into other activities, but still ultimately once you get your forged guns, all the different forged guns, you're going to kind of not have much to grind for. It did seem easier, though, to get the materials from doing the strikes than it did from the public events sometimes and opening chests. Every strike I ran through, I got a guaranteed 2 materials at least, about 10-15 minutes per strike. Whereas the public events and chests, I mean, I wasn't grinding super hard with it. I mean, I could have probably gotten them a little quicker, but it seemed a little less common to get the materials. Luckily, though, the one public event that I did get a rare piece, so I didn't have to collect all 30 of the materials because that was starting to drag on. But I did manage to grind out all the materials for all the prophecies. Currently, I have 4 unique looking legendary weapons, which the look of them is fantastic. None of them, I mean, standout wise, there's nothing really that makes them stand out that much more from any other guns in the game, but their appearance, they did a great job with them. Very futuristic sort of Vex fused weapons. I mean, to me, it's worth keeping them just for the sake of being unique, and I really don't feel like grinding the materials all over again. So I think all in all, it's a pretty great system added in, but I think it'll be limited once you finish all the prophecies. Looping back around, though, I mean, a couple final thoughts. There are things that need to be addressed moving forward with this game and expansions, but the Curse of Osiris to me was a pretty solid experience. The final boss encounter was very well done, I thought, and I thought it was fairly refreshing that it's not just a bullet sponge, so good on you, Bungie, for stepping outside the box and making it a pretty epic feeling fight. I mean, granted, you did fight just waves of enemies, you end up getting there going through a couple simple steps, but it was something different, and I really enjoyed it. I don't really think that all the backlash that's out there is completely warranted. I mean, obviously there is negativity surrounding any game, or anything for that matter, but all in all, they did a pretty good job with the expansion and with what they're doing with Destiny 2, constantly trying to make it better. Personally, as long as there continues to be improvement and progression with the game as there was with Destiny 1, I intend to keep supporting them and the content that they put out. That about wraps things up for this video. As always, though, leave a comment down below, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to get updates as I continue to put out more and more content. Thanks for watching.